Well, belated happy Easter to those of you that maybe didn't get it out on Friday, but certainly wherever you are, whether practicing, barely observant here, or maybe go once a year, you know that the Catholic Church is at the dawn of a new day, newly installed Pope. But with 60% of American Catholics describing the Church as out of touch, significant challenges certainly lie ahead for the Vatican. New York's Cardinal Timothy Dolan, he recently spoke with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News to discuss his experience at the conclave, the Church's challenges, and yes, same-sex marriage.
What was very important is the time before the conclave. The conclave was relatively brief. It was only 28 hours, right? The time before, that's when I was actually more nervous, believe it or not, because I felt the burden of getting to know my brother cardinals better. Once I entered the conclave, George, and the veterans, the cardinals who had been at a conclave before said, Tim, relax, because you get to know them, and by the time you enter the conclave, you will have settled on 2 or 3 people that you think with whom you would be at peace, being the next successor of St. Peter. And that was true.
And now that Pope Francis is in place, what is the challenge facing him, the biggest challenge facing him as leader of more than 1 billion Catholics?
You know what I think it is? And actually, I spoke about this in the congregations before the conclave. I think the biggest challenge facing him, George, is to reconnect Jesus and his church.
What do you say as a minister, as a pastor, to a gay couple that comes to you and say, we love God, we love the church, but we also love each other and we want to raise a family in faith? Sure. What do you say to them?
Well, the first thing I'd say to them is, I love you too, and God loves you, and you were made in God's image and likeness. And we want your happiness, and you're entitled to friendship. But we also know that God has told us that the way to happiness, that especially when it comes to sexual love, that is intended only for a man and woman in marriage, where children can come about naturally. We got to do better to see that our defense of marriage is not reduced to an attack on gay people. And I admit we haven't been too good at that. We try our darndest to make sure we're not an anti-anybody. We're in the defense of what God has taught us about marriage, that it's one man, one woman forever to bring about new life.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think we could all agree here. Probably the best politician in New York is Cardinal Dolan. He has an ability to communicate here that even if you didn't agree with 100% of what he said, it's just palpable. I think the guy's got an amazing ability. I know there's more than a few people thought the church would have been best served with him. That all said, I'll start with you, Senator. Sometimes, every time you think that the church acknowledges the ground truth of where they are, declining number of people in the pews, the offertory basket's not as filled as much, the parochial school is shutting down here in big numbers, and empty seminaries and convents, then you hear the comments on the other side that say everything's just fine. How much of a reality check do you think our church has gotten in the last couple months?
Well, I think the American church and Western European church environments are very different from the world of Rome and the mindset that may exist inside the hierarchy of the church. There are internal issues and there are external issues. I think this Pope, Pope Francis, his humility and his personality will focus on the internal issues and will probably bring a pastoral mindset, the fact that he doesn't have the attitude of someone who's taking on this as a high and mighty thing is going to be very refreshing. When you deal with the external issues, then the differences you're going to have are the difference between the Western democracies, who are more liberal, if you want to use that word, TJ will in a second, on issues such as same-sex.
Right. Saying it. Yeah, he's having withdrawals over there. Yeah.
But so I don't expect Pope Francis, or for that matter, Cardinal Dolan, both of whom have terrific personalities, to deal with the kind of volatile issues of abortion and same-sex marriage any differently than their predecessors did. But what they will do is put a warm pastoral face on the faith, and that I think will help on the internal issues, where for many years the hierarchy of the church has seemed very cold and foreboding. And without commenting beyond that by person, I think you need these kinds of individuals to lead a church in the 21st century, or you will become less relevant.
But I sat down with Cardinal Egan, and I said, I speak, I think, for a lot of people that would like on Sunday, they don't expect the church is going to reverse its position on gay marriage, that don't, even though 90% of Catholics, more than that, believe in contraception, think they're going to change. but you don't want to get in the pews on Sunday and bombarded with the culture wars. And it's gotten so political, I feel, for the last 10, 15 years, you can't go a few masses without hearing about abortion. And you would hope it would be more about feed the hungry, clothe the naked. I don't know if that changes now, but you're with me on this? I'm not alone in that, where it's just like, I don't want to do politics on Sunday.
You know, and I'm Catholic and go to church every Sunday and have my whole life. And it was shocking to me to hear so much about Obamacare over the last few years. For instance, I've spent plenty of Sundays in evangelical churches and Baptist churches where it's always politics, at least for 5 or 10 minutes during every Mass. They introduce candidates, for God's sake. But it was a little off-putting to me, too. But the other thing that I'll say is that it's also, I'm not agreeing with my fellow liberals here when they try to make the church fit the modern constraints of what's popular. Religion, by definition, is narrow and conservative. You're making specific choices about how you see the world and the afterlife, and how people should be with each other.
But if there's going to be a preservation of a church, simple math, that's what I'm talking about. Math says you got a declining number of priests. It's not a crazy concept, TJ, to say, you know what? We let priests marry in this church. People don't remember that till the 1300s, until all of a sudden they didn't want the kid to get the church, and economically, and we, with a wink and a nod, Greek Orthodox priests can have married with kids and all the rest. Why that can't even be on the table for a conversation? We heard the laity was going to be heard, right?
You know what
I'm still waiting for that.
I'll be honest with you, you know. It is actually on a table amongst the rank and file. It is what we're talking about over donuts and coffee after the 10 o'clock Mass. It is on the table, and it's going to work its way up eventually. Is it going to do it this century? I don't know. Probably not.
It's amazing. But you're rounding it off. We're at 2013, by the way. All right.
But it is part of the conversation. It's part of the conversation here. And and at the same time too, the Catholic Church, while we're under the microscope here, we're not hanging gays. We're not stoning adulterers. We're not drawing and quartering people. There's another huge religion that's apparently exploding around the world that is doing that, and I hear nary a word. So the thing is, though, is that, as you said, we can't be necessarily looking to make religion what it should be for us.
I get it, but what I'm saying is, maybe some people want modernity out of the church, and that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm just saying, I think there's an appetite for it more, for faith. And I think the church sometimes goes out of its way inadvertently to turn people off that might come in the door. I think Dolan gets it, but I think he's in the minority.
Well, Richard, I think you pointed out some things that are very much part of standard Catholic teaching, straight from the Scripture. Whatsoever you do for the least of my brothers, that you do unto to me. The message of trying to help people who are poor, which is what Pope Francis talked about in his very first sermon, that's the message that will bring Catholics relevancy in America and in Europe. And I think that is a message that hasn't been focused on as much. And if you look at the Catholic Church's position, it's not universally conservative on everything. It is liberal on the death penalty. It is liberal on workers' rights. It's liberal on a host of things.
I was just talking about that today on VOX.
Immigrant population.
Yeah, I was just saying that today. I was saying that, you know what, for the last few years, the Catholic Church in America has been rendered somewhat neutered because they're being tugged at from both, and both sides are kind of saying, you know what, let's not even worry about them. Because you have the conservatives who want them for the pro-life, and you have the Democrat side saying, well, listen, they're anti-war. I hear plenty of anti-war.
Even workers' rights. I mean, the Democrats were the Catholic Party under Kennedy for a long, long time.
It just seems, Richard, the church will grow with the message of inclusion rather than maybe shutting the door is a strong word, but rather than excluding people. I mean, what Cardinal Dolan said about the gay community, it's an olive branch. And we're getting olive branches from the Pope now, and that's something we saw with the Pope before the one, going back 2 popes. We're inclusive.
That would be John Paul II.
Yes, inclusive. Everybody reaching out. I got you. Everybody reaching out.
And I think compassion is the key word here. And what the senator was saying is that compassion is Catholic. And it doesn't mean that we may disagree with this or that, but we're always there. We're always welcoming and listening and want to talk to whoever it is. And actually,
I get that from the laity.
Yeah.
But Do you get that from the leadership?
Pope Francis could not have been chosen any better by a public relations consultant. One thing that he did this week, and I honestly think that it was just him, and I don't think that he was trying to break news. He washed the feet of sinners, which is, by the way, what Jesus did, and not his own brethren, the cardinals. That was shocking news to some people, but that is fundamentally a Catholic Christian thing to do. And he was merely reflecting his faith. And if that's the future of my religion, then I'm all for it.
The images, this guy is hitting home runs every time. As we're talking, we're seeing these multiple images of the Pope hugging the infirm, adult men being held over by their older brother, and he's embracing. And I tell you what, his eyes are closed. This guy, talk about optics. The babies, it's real. This guy's the real deal. I think it's hard to really debate that. I think everybody's on board with this guy being the real deal. He's not living in the papal apartment. He's living amongst his brothers in a cardinal like dormitory there.
I know.
It's incredible.
I guess I'm the lone cynic, may be too strong, but I thought we were going to go younger. Okay, and secondly, don't forget.
I said Marco Rubio. I said Rubio.
Well, I'm sure you did, and you managed to go 5 minutes without saying liberal. But but remember, back in Argentina, he was the loudest voice against gay marriage, and many people think a rallying cry for how it got passed nationally.
Yeah.
So again, I don't expect the church, like some, to change their position on it. It's just which fights do they choose to take. I guess that's my only point, and hopefully. Everything so far, you're absolutely right. All the optics, and I believe genuine, had of this person is that he cares for those that have been largely forgotten.
All right. Get us through the day.
George Michael said that.
Yeah, so hey, take it to the
Great segue. Thank you, Evan, with George Michael. All right, we take a quick break right now. When we come back, though, speaking of faith or lack thereof, we'll talk about the Yankees and the Mets. We're going to take you live to both Queens and the Bronx for the very latest. Here, I'll give you a hint. It wasn't good news in one location. We'll be right back. Stay with us.